together, see we do it right. Together can we do it? Yes, we can.
Each man must do his bit.
Welcome to another edition of The Public Interest. My name is David Granger, and in this series of programs, we continue our examination of international relations of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, particularly how our foreign policy, is connected to our domestic policy. And today we'll be dealing with the Guyana Shield. I regard the Guyana Shield as essential to Guyana's environmental security. I'm Guyanese. I'm glad that I'm Guyanese. I'm glad I was born in what I would call the most beautiful, the most blissful, the most bountiful Caribbean country, the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. And when we speak of Guyana, we also speak about the presence of Guyana in the Guyana Shield. The Guyana Shield is a geological or geographical concept which is about 2,288,000 square kilometers. It's huge. It encompasses Guyana, Guyane, which is French Guyana, Suriname, Venezuela, and parts of Brazil and Colombia. Before we go on, I just want to clarify the names because sometimes people get confused. Guiana is the name of the shield, the Guyana Shield, and that is a geographical expression. But Guyana is the country in which I was born, the country I'm living in. Guyane is the French word for French Guyana. Some people, well, of course, they call it Cayenne, but Cayenne is really a corruption of Guyane. And then, of course, in Venezuela, eastern Venezuela, you have Guyana, Guyana. So there are four spellings, but the one I'm speaking about today, most of all, is Guyana. You have the Guyana Highlands, you have the Guyana Shield, and off the Atlantic, you have the Guyana Current. So there are four different expressions, but the Guyana Shield is what we are concerned with today. This huge area, 2,288,000 square kilometers, including 6 countries. So let's not be confused. But the Guyana Shield is important not only to Guyana itself, but to the entire world. It contains some of the Earth's most diverse biospheres. It has over 3,000 known vertebrate species, a vast variety of invertebrates, 1,168 species of freshwater fish, 269 species of amphibians, 295 species of reptiles, 1,004 types of birds, 282 mammals, and about 14,000 plant species. This is magnificent. I used to call it, the Garden of Eden. In fact, I don't mean to offend any religious persons in the audience, but it is hard to imagine a place more beautiful, more bountiful, and more blissful than the Guyana Shield. And I'm glad that I was born here, that I'm living here. But we are the trustees for the Guyana Shield. We don't own it. Just as we inherited from our foreparents, we must pass it on to our children and grandchildren. The shield is important to the Earth. It stores 18% of Earth's tropical forest carbon. So when other countries foul up the atmosphere, the shield helps absorb the carbon monoxide. And that is important of trees. That's why I tell people don't cut down the trees, because the trees are important for the earth to breathe. We call the Guyana Shield the lungs of the earth. The shield is also essential to the Earth's environment as a defense against the damage which humans cause. Humans cause damage all the time by burning stuff, by disposal of solid waste, by polluting the atmosphere, solid waste, single-use plastics, and the use of pesticides and all types of chemicals, polluting our rivers, the destruction of our sea defenses, all of this damage caused by humans. Part of it is corrected by the services if I can call it that, the environmental services of the Guyana Shield. And the shield is essential to enriching and replenishing the Earth's biodiversity. It is essential to providing ecosystem services such as food. As you know, the indigenous people and people all around the world have been living in the forest for millennia, and it provides fresh water, medicinal products, and we know that a lot of medicines come from plants in the jungle. And I'm particularly fond of mabi, which is made from the bark of a tree. Mabi is an indigenous word. The foreigners converted to Mauby. But mabi is a product of the jungle. We have a lot of timber and non-timber products. And of course, the environment helps in the regulation of the water cycle, water quality, and of course, pollination. So the Guyana Shield is important not only for the earth, but also for our own survival as human beings. Now, uh, we look at the question of the necessity of the shield to Guyana. Our constitution, the constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, prescribes, and let me quote, because this is constitution, this is not guesswork. Everyone has the right to an environment that is not harmful to his or her well-being. Everyone has the right to a clean environment. That's your entitlement. And similarly, the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development several years ago stated, and look at the similarity, human beings are at the center of concerns for sustainable development and are entitled to a healthy and productive life in harmony with nature. And when you see people talking about oil and gas, you must consider whether these substances are going to harm the environment, which we are guaranteed um, should be kept clean and safe for human beings. So we always have to balance, human needs against, human needs against human greed when we think of environmental concerns. Now, the shield faces dangers, and every day the environment is being damaged. Land is being degraded by large scale farming, by logging, by mining. And on a previous program, I raised the question, who will fill the holes that have appeared all over Guyana's landscape over the last 50 years? The holes created by bauxite mining, the holes created by gold mining. Um, and this is a big question that we all have to answer, because we are going to be bequeathing those holes to our children and grandchildren. Um, so we have to look at the flooding situation in Guyana, which persists up to the present time, and you can see from the news that Guyana had to send food aid to Suriname, because Suriname, like Guyana, is low-lying coastal state. And when we look at what is happening in Guyana, especially in the regions which have been affected by uh, mining and logging, Barima Waini, Region 1, the Kuyuni Mazaruni, Region 7, Potaro Siparuni, Region 8, the Rupununi, Region 9, and the Upper Demerara, Boabis, Region 10. All of them, all of those hinterland regions, three-quarters of our country, have been disfigured by deforested landscapes, by discolored creeks, and by damaged riverbanks. And when you fly over those areas, when you visit those areas, you'll see the debris of discarded plastics, and of course, disused equipment. After the logging and mining, people just abandon everything and leave. But of course, it's going to be there for decades to come, because it is non-biodegradable. And of course, there are huge pools, and mosquitoes breed in those pools. And if those mosquitoes are malaria breeding malaria-breeding mosquitoes. They will infect human beings and they'll bring that disease back to the coast. I can tell you because I've seen some young people who, in haste, have run into the hinterland to get into the gold mines, and then they've equally hastily come back to their villages um, sick with malaria fever. So we have to be careful. Abandoning these mining and logging areas is not joke, is not being economical or saving money. It's causing long-term damage to young people. Now, Guyana established the Iroquois International Center for Rainforest Conservation Development, a very important area, 3,716 square kilometers, bigger than Malta. And the purpose of establishing this center was to be a model, not only to Guyanese, but to the world. And it came in the wake of the Rio Agenda on Forest Biodiversity and Climate Change. By in my perception, the Iroquois Center is at the center of Guyana. Just look at the map, and it's at the center of the Guyana Shield because Guyana itself is at the center of the Guyana Shield. On the west, you have Colombia and Venezuela. On the east, you have Suriname and French Guyana, Guyana, and to the south, you have Brazil. So I feel that Guyana is not only the center, but Iroquois is the center of the center. But creating the center is necessary, but it is not sufficient to bring about change because some people don't even know where the center is. Some people have never visited it and they don't know whether that center has been having an impact on climate change and on Guyana's biodiversity. Nevertheless, my friends, we need to look at the environment in a holistic way, in a comprehensive way. And we need to consider the possibilities, if not the necessity, for international cooperation. Now, Guyana is not an island, and our borders are porous, but in addition to that, our international relations must reinforce our national policies. We cannot confront the challenges facing the Guyana Shield on our own because the Guyana Shield is a multi-state entity. There are at least 6 nations in the Guyana Shield, and animals come and go. Even bandits come and go. Migrants come and go. Garimperos come and go. And there's a lot of backtracking on all of our borders. It has now become a national institution, and as you know, we've got about 36,000 Venezuelan migrants. They didn't come through Chedijagan International Airport. They came just across the borders, just swim across the creeks, came in boats. And we need to understand that this is not a purely national problem. It is an international problem. And we need international assistance if we are to overcome these challenges. We have to pursue partnerships. And in my tenure in office as president from 2015 to 2020, although it was cut short for reasons which you know, I visited a dozen capitals in pursuit of partnerships for environmental security, environmental solidarity and cooperation. A dozen cities. I went to Addis Ababa, I went to Bern, I'm in Switzerland, I went to Brasilia, to Brussels, to Da Nang in Vietnam, to Geneva, to London, to Marrakesh, Nairobi, New Delhi, New York, Washington. Why did I go to these places? Because each one held a promise of contributing to the security of the Guyana Shield and to the environmental stability of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. And they weren't wasted trips because Guyana was able to establish itself as a green state. And people recognized Guyana during my tenure as president for its environmental stewardship. And things are a little different now. People are becoming drunk with oil and gas. But certainly during that 5-year period, 2015 to 2020, everyone knew that we were serious about a green environment, about environmental security. Look at the record. The record speaks for itself. Since July 1978, during the lifetime of our first executive president, Forbes Burnham, we entered the Amazon Cooperation Treaty, which and this eventually gave rise to the ACTO, Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, which is meant to promote the harmonious development of Amazonian states to produce mutually beneficial results in achieving the sustainable development of all Amazon states, not only Guyana, but also Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, Suriname, and French Guyana. But sometimes presidents change and policies change, and the funding that was available in the 80s and 90s is no longer available now in the 2000s under the present Brazilian administration. Of course, Brazil was the hub, Brazil was the center of ACTO, the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization. But like other countries on the continent, it faces some financial challenges. And I think it's true to say that ACTO has not achieved its aims. Then, of course, you know about the Langkawi Declaration on the Environment, which is in October 1989. Our second executive president, Desmond Hoyt, went to the 10th heads of government meeting of the Commonwealth in Malaya, Malaysia. And that gave rise to what eventually became the Langkawi Declaration on the Environment. And it was a result of that, and it was at that very conference that the idea came up of establishing Irokrama some years later. And the whole idea behind the Langkawi Declaration was to ensure, this is since 1989, this is what, 33 years ago, to ensure environmental sustainability, including the danger posed by the greenhouse effect, by marine pollution, land degradation, and species extinction. 33 years ago, we were speaking about this, and well, it's still a job to be completed. There's still a series of actions which still require a lot of attention by countries all around the world. It's incomplete. Then there was the Paris Agreement in April 2016. And as president, I was very happy to go to the United Nations. And by some magic, I was the first president of any country to be called to receive my certificate from the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, a very proud moment for the Republic of Guyana, because by my going first, it was a recognition of the fact that Guyana was really first and foremost in the struggle for environmental sustainability worldwide. And then there's the Paris Agreement on involving the United Nations framework on climate change and the United Nations Conference on the Environment and Development. All of these conferences were important steps towards ensuring the environmental sustainability of Guyana and the Guyana Shield. Then there are other actions taking place, not only at governmental, but also at non-governmental level. There's something called the RENFORSAP. It's really a French acronym for Renforcer le réseau des aires protégées du plateau de Guyane. It's a project among Guyana, Guyane, and Suriname, aimed at strengthening the resilience of the livelihoods. Remember, it's not governments, it's the livelihoods of the local population in the context of the impact on the Guyana Shield. And you'll see both in our constitution and in this RENFORSAP, the focus is on people, on human beings. And that's very important, because when you're talking about the environment, you're not talking about governmental structures. You're talking about what happens down in the village, down in the water, down in the communities. And 3 years ago, you had the Letitia Declaration. Again, it's very confusing. You may not be clear whether this was an attempt to replace or displace the Amazon Cooperation Treaty, but seven Amazonian states, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Peru, and Suriname, participated in the Letitia Declaration, aimed at strengthening and coordinating actions to preserve the natural resources of the Amazon. The Amazon is the biggest part of the Guyana Shield. So the pact, this Letitia Pact, as it's called, was launched 3 years ago, but it does not address some of the fundamental problems, the problems of deforestation, the problems of the expansion of cattle ranching. People are cutting down the forest to open ranches. Well, it is depriving the Guyana Shield and depriving the Amazon of its contribution to absorb carbon dioxide because, as you know, the cows fart a lot and they generate a lot of carbon monoxide themselves. So the cattle ranching itself and the cutting down the forest to facilitate cattle ranching, large-scale farming, people want to get rich by producing corn and soya. And much of this development in ranching and large-scale farming took place at the expense of the forest. So when you see some huge forest fires in our neighboring countries, these forest fires have a cause, and the worse yet, they have a consequence. That is, the world is getting warmer, and instead of keeping the forest intact, people are burning down the forest to breed cows. And unfortunately, in Guyana, people are cutting down the mangroves to set up oil and gas installations. So we are really harming not only ourselves, but we're harming the future generations. So the Letitia Declaration is there. And then as a follow-up, we had something called the Escazú Agreement. Only last year, April, Escazú Agreement, which enshrines, again, every person's right to live in a healthy environment and the country's right to sustainable development. It includes measures to strengthen capacities and cooperation at community level. So, when we speak about environment, we cannot ignore the importance of people in communities. And the Escazú Agreement was an effort to incorporate, communities in environmental decision making. Now, I must explain that things like the Letitia Declaration and the Escazú Agreement don't function on their own. They are the product of decision making by governments or human beings. And unfortunately, sometimes a meeting is called, and can you imagine a meeting is actually called in Venezuela, is not invited because Venezuela government, is not approved by the Brazilian government, and so it goes on. So the shield is suffering, um, while the two giants are struggling between among themselves. It doesn't make sense to have a meeting on the Guyana Shield and you leave out the country the size of Venezuela. And in fact, Venezuela has a greater claim to the Guyana Shield than maybe some other countries, simply because of the huge part of Venezuela that is a part of the Guyana Shield. And then, of course, we had what I call a mysterious development, the Guyana Shield Strategic Dialogue. Suddenly, last year, August, um, the French government seems to have engineered a meeting between Guyana, Suriname, and Guyana. Well, of course, Guyana is not a Guyana is not a state. Guyana is what they call a département d'outre-mer. It is a department of metropolitan France. So this meeting took place, um, it seems to have had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Nobody's heard anything about this so-called strategic dialogue since August 2021. We are approaching August 2022, and the dialogue was supposed to come up with a master plan. A whole set of government officials went off to Suriname, and that's the last we heard about it. I cannot imagine a strategic master plan for the Guyana Shield, and Brazil, Venezuela are not involved. So what's the point of involving three and not three, neighboring countries, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guyana, and not involving the three other countries, Colombia, Brazil, and Venezuela? Strange, strange. But as I said, nothing has happened that I'm aware of over the last 10 months or so, as far as the Guyana Shield strategic dialogue. I don't know why they call it the Guyana Shield strategic dialogue. It should be called the Partial Guyana Shield strategic dialogue. And then, of course, President of Guyana went to Glasgow and was party to what is called the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forest and Land Use. That was in November last year. This declaration emphasized the interdependent role of forests and biodiversity, sustainable land use, in enabling the Earth to meet its sustainable development goals and to adapt to climate change. My friends, there have been lots of meetings, there have been lots of conferences, there have been lots of agreements and pacts over the last 40 years. The question is, what is the way forward for the Guyana Shield and for the Cooperative Republic of Guyana? This thing concerns us and our children, so we better be very thoughtful, very concerned, very careful about what happens to our environment. We must all play a role. You mustn't expect the governments to look after our future for us. We have to take charge of these developments. The Guyana Shield development is about what is happening at present, or present day security, but it's also concerned with long-term sustainability and the sustainability for our posterity, our children and grandchildren. States within the Shield, particularly the three smallest states, Guyana, Suriname, and Guyana, French Guyana, will find it difficult to derive benefits from the entire Guyana Shield without change taking place. And I would like to suggest some changes. When I was in office, we had proposed the Guyana State, the Green State Development Strategy, GSDS, Vision 2024. We don't think about a year, we thought about a decade, beyond that, up to 2040. And this was aimed at mainstreaming environmental consciousness in the population. That is, in schools, in government policies, in non-governmental organizations, environment must be mainstream. It is not a little sideshow for a department. Every aspect of Guyana's development must reflect that green image, that environmental image. Now, in my view, the PPP made a terrible mistake when it got into office in August 2020 by throwing the Green State Development Strategy out of the window, and they put its own low carbon development strategy. I'm not going to challenge that at the present time. But in my view, whatever name you call it, GSDS or LCDS, there are 5 principles that must be embodied. One is investment. You cannot have any development in the Guyana Shield without investment. It means that governments must set aside money specifically for green technologies. Without the investment, it's just talk. And talk is hot air. Second, there must be infrastructural development. And we've been talking about this for decades. You cannot reach out to Brazil without roads and bridges. And for example, as you know, there's a bridge over the Takutu when President Lowe, and still, that's it. We have never really been able to move forward, maybe because of lack of funds, uh, in developing a highway from Georgetown right through to Boa Vista, to Manaus. Why not? But there must be infrastructure development, and there is a scheme, the integration of the South American, the IIRSA, which needs to be considered. Then you have the problem of institutional governance. We have to involve the regional democratic councils. My administration created four tongues in the hinterland for the first time. The vast Guyana hinterland cannot be administered by villages. We created four tongues at Mabaruma, Bartica, Madia, and Lethem. And those tongues, those regional, those municipalities, those RDCs must be involved. Every region must have its own regional park, equivalent to a national park. And the people in the region must take ownership of their region to prevent environmental damage. And so there must be that institutional governments at regional level. There must be international cooperation because sometimes, as you may know, when there's flooding in the Rupununi, the rain is not falling in the Rupununi, but the rivers are flooding because the rivers may have their origin in Brazil. And when the Amazon floods or the Rio Branco floods, you find flooding in the Rupununi. So international cooperation is essential to environmental security. And finally, there must be transformational economic and social policies. That is, environment involves human beings, it involves communities, indigenous communities. You've heard the expression free, prior, informed consent. People have to be consulted. You have to have policies in which the people are involved. This is what Article 13 of our Constitution is all about, that people at the grassroots level must be involved in making decisions which concern their own communities and their own welfare. That is Article 13 of our Constitution. And if we are to make use of the policies for transforming this Guyana Shield, there must be involvement of the people. Otherwise, the people will not share, they will not share that vision, and they will not participate meaningfully in the policies. My friends, the Shield's concerns are transnational. They're not local, and the strength of the Guyana Shield is in its internationalization. We have to speak to Brazil and Venezuela and Suriname and Colombia and French Guyana if we are to make the shield work for us. The shield is essential to the earth. It is essential to Guyana. And we will gain nothing by remaining silent. I am proposing now, this 24th day of June, that Guyana establishes a multinational or a multilateral coordinating secretariat to coordinate all of the activities, all these conferences and pacts and agreements in the Guyana Shield. So at least there is a core, um, not necessarily a supranational core, but a coordinating secretariat, which pays attention to all of the issues surrounding the Guyana Shield. My friends, the Guyana Shield is important, but it's a complex mechanism. It will not function on its own. It needs direction, it needs the assistance, it needs the participation of non-governmental organizations, governmental organizations, at community level, at the neighborhoods, at regional level, in our 10 RDCs, at the national level, at the central government level, and the international level as well. Presidents, I can tell you, presidents and political parties will come and go, but the Guyana Shield is forever. It's our birthright. We are the trustees. We inherited it from our parents and grandparents, and we must pass on that legacy to posterity. They need to look to us, the present generation, if we are to pass on that legacy of the Guyana Shield to future generations, our children and grandchildren. May God bless Guyana. May God bless the Guyana Shield. And may God bless you. Thank you.
Let us cooperate for the younger. Let us cooperate for our land. Let us resolve to fight together. See we do it right together. Can we do it? Yes, we can.